My dear grandchildren, come and sit here with me. There are some lessons only time can teach us, and today I want to share one of those with you. This isn't just a memory, it's the legacy I want to pass on. It's a true story about hidden strength, about how a woman can rise from the ashes. I want you to know about the past, not to live in it, but so you can walk more steadily into the future, appreciate what you have, and recognize your own worth. If you are listening from anywhere in the world, please leave a comment and subscribe, because there are truths that need to be spread, even if they might shake your beliefs. There are stories, no matter how painful, that must be told. The women in my house were even more invisible than the men. My dad used to say that women didn't need much schooling. As long as they can read a little and do the math for the grocery store, that's enough, he would repeat. So when I turned 10, they took me out of school. I only made it to the 4th grade. I remember the last day when I had to return the books. Miss Anderson, the teacher, looked at me with a sadness I didn't understand then, but which I now understand perfectly. She had once told me that I was good with words, that I had beautiful handwriting, that I could become a teacher if I kept studying. That was my secret dream, the one I guarded like a treasure. To be a teacher, to stand in front of a chalkboard, to teach other children to read, to dream. But the dreams of poor girls are worth little, right? Especially in those years. So I put away my books and dedicated myself to what was expected of me. Cooking, cleaning, washing, taking care of my younger siblings, getting up before dawn to help my mom with breakfast, carrying water from the well, kneading dough for bread until my arms ached, sweeping, mopping, baking, doing everything a decent woman should know how to do. The only thing that saved me was quilting. My grandmother Dorothy taught me. She lived on the same property as us, in a small room at the back that smelled of dried herbs and incense. She was of pure Appalachian stock, one of those who still held on to the old ways. She had the wisest hands I have ever known. I would sit next to her in the afternoons and learn. First simple stitches, then the complicated ones. She would tell me, "When a woman sews, she puts her soul into every stitch. This isn't just fabric, it's your heart made visible." I would embroider flowers, birds, colorful patterns, and in those quiet afternoons with my grandmother, I reclaimed a little piece of myself. The years passed like that. 16, 17, 18. I saw other girls from the neighborhood getting married, having children. My dad started to get nervous. "You're getting left on the shelf," he would tell me. Women got married young. Back then, at 19 with no suitor, you were already seen as an old maid, as if something were wrong with you. The truth is, I didn't have much desire to get married either. I saw my mom, always quiet, always tired, always obeying, and I thought, is that all there is? Is my life going to be like that? Just changing kitchens but doing the same thing, only for another man instead of my dad? But when I turned 20, my dad became stricter. I couldn't even go to the corner store alone anymore. If I went to the farmer's market, I had to go with my mom. If we went to church, we all went together. "A decent girl doesn't wander around," he'd repeat. "You have to protect your reputation if you want a good man to notice you." I felt like a bird in a cage, getting smaller and smaller. The world was shrinking around me until I was left in a space the size of our clapboard house, the path to the church, the market stall where my mom shopped. That was my entire universe. And then, when I had already accepted that my life would be that and nothing more, he appeared. It was a Sunday after church. I had just turned 21. My family and I were in the courtyard of Street Marks Community Church when he approached. He was tall, with a fair complexion, his hair combed back with pomade. He wore dress pants and a well-ironed white shirt, polished shoes that shone in the Sunday. He looked different from the boys in the neighborhood. More, I don't know how to explain it, more refined, I suppose. He spoke to my dad first, as was proper. He took off his hat, gave a small bow. "Mr. Walter," he said in a polite voice, "forgive me for bothering you. My name is Richard Walker. I work in the city at a print shop. I've seen your family at church several times, and I would like, with your permission, to get to know your daughter." My heart started beating so fast, I thought everyone would hear it. No one had ever been interested in me. And this man who looked so proper, so polite, was asking for permission to court me, Patricia, the invisible one. My dad looked him up and down, sizing him up. At a print shop, you say? Yes, sir, I'm a typesetter. I've been working there for 5 years. It's an honest, stable job. I earn a good wage. My dad nodded slowly. I could see the wheels turning in his head. A man with a steady job, a trade, who looked educated and spoke well. Not a bad option for a daughter who was already getting left on the shelf. You can come to the house next Sunday, my dad finally said. For coffee, but my wife will be present, understood? Of course, Mr. Walter. I would expect nothing less from a decent family, and that's how it all began. That's how the story I'm going to tell you today began. A story that started with the promise of love and ended, well, you'll find that out later. Richard came that Sunday, and the next, and the one after that. Each time he brought something. Sweet rolls from the downtown bakery, flowers for my mom, cigars for my dad. He would sit in the living room while my mom and I prepared coffee and brought the cups. He talked about his work, about the city, about things I barely knew. He used words I didn't always understand, but they sounded beautiful coming from his mouth. My mom watched us like a hawk. We were never alone, not even for a minute. But Richard knew how to make those short hours feel special. He would look me in the eye when he spoke. He would ask me things about myself, about what I liked to do. When I told him I embroidered, his eyes lit up. Really? That's an art, he said. At the print shop, we appreciate everything that's made by hand, everything that requires patience and skill. I'd love to see your work someday. No one had ever told me my embroidery was an art. For my family, it was just something women did, something normal, nothing special. But Richard saw it differently. He saw me differently. 3 months went by like that, 3 months of Sunday visits, of short but sweet conversations, of glances that lasted a second longer than permitted. I started to daydream, to imagine what my life would be like married to Richard. A house in the city, maybe. He working at his print shop, me sewing at home, selling my blouses at the market. Children someday. A different life from my mom's, a life where someone saw me, valued me. My dad was pleased with the courtship. He's a good boy, he'd say. Hardworking, polite, respectful. You could do a lot worse, Patricia. And I agreed. Richard seemed perfect. Too perfect, maybe, but I was too naive to question it. You might be wondering, my dears, how a girl could be so naive. But you see, when you've spent your whole life in the shadows, the first person who brings you a little light feels like the sun itself. And you don't question the sun, you just turn your face to it and soak in the warmth. After 6 months, Richard spoke with my dad. He formally asked for my hand. My dad accepted. The wedding was set for 3 months later, in the spring, when the dogwoods would be blooming and Illinois would turn white and pink. Those 3 months were the happiest of my life up to that point. We prepared for the wedding. My mom and my sisters helped me embroider my wedding dress, white with red and gold flowers. Richard and I started looking for a house. We found a small house in a neighborhood near his work, with 2 rooms and a backyard where I could put my quilting frame. I would sew at night by the light of the kerosene lamp, imagining my new life. Richard was attentive, affectionate within the permitted limits. He never tried anything improper, always respectful, always proper. That made me trust him completely. The night before the wedding, I could barely sleep from nerves, from excitement, from fear too. Everything was going to change. The next day I would be a married woman. I would have my own house, my own life. I would no longer be invisible Patricia. I would be Mrs. Walker. The wedding was simple, but beautiful. In the same St. Mark's Church where we met, I wore my embroidered dress, a crown of orange blossoms in my hair, the gold earrings that had belonged to my grandmother. Richard was handsome in his dark suit and tie. When he saw me enter the church, he smiled, and in that smile, I saw my future, or so I thought. After the ceremony, there was a small party at my parents' house. Pot roast, casseroles, sweet tea, whiskey for the men. Music from a local country band that a friend of my dad's got for a good price. We danced, we ate, we laughed. Everyone was happy for us. Everyone wished us the best. When it got dark, Richard and I said our goodbyes. We were going to spend our first night together in the little house we had rented. I had a small suitcase with my clothes, my personal things, some blouses I had finished embroidering. Richard carried the suitcase, and we walked through the streets of Geneva under the stars. We arrived at the house. Richard opened the door. We went inside. He closed the door behind us, and right there, at that moment, everything began to change. But that, my dears, is a story for the next chapter, because what happened that night, what I discovered, what I lived through, I need to take a breath before telling it. I need to prepare myself, because even though more than 40 years have passed, it still hurts. It still burns inside me like embers that never completely go out. For now, I'll just tell you this. The Patricia who entered that house that night died before dawn. And the one who came out, well, she was a completely different person. A person who had to learn to survive when everything falls apart. A person who discovered that sometimes hell isn't down below, but right here on earth, behind a closed door. That first night as a married woman was magical, or so I thought at the time. Richard closed the door behind us and smiled at me, that smile that I had fallen in love with for 6 months. He took my hand and showed me our little house. It was small but cozy, 2 rooms, a kitchen with a wood-burning stove, a backyard where he had already put a quilting frame for me. Look, he said, showing me the frame. I had it specially made, so you can keep quilting, so you can sell your blouses at the market if you want. My eyes filled with tears. No one had ever done anything like that for me. Really, truly, I want you to be happy, Patricia. I want this to be your house, your space. I want you to feel free. That night was tender, nervous, new. Richard was patient with me. He spoke softly to me, made me feel safe. When I finally fell asleep in his arms, I thought I was the luckiest woman in the world. The first few days were a dream. I would wake up early with the crowing of the neighbors' roosters. I'd prepare percolator coffee with cinnamon and brown sugar, just how Richard liked it. The smell filled the whole little house and made me feel that, yes, this was my home. I'd make biscuits by hand on the griddle. The rhythm of patting the dough was like a song. Fried potatoes, scrambled eggs with hot sauce when we had them all simple, but made with love. Richard would have breakfast, praising my cooking. "You cook better than my mom," he'd say, and I would blush with pride. He would kiss me before leaving for work, and I would be floating for the rest of the morning. After he left, I would clean the house, sweep the cement floor, dust the furniture, wash the dishes in the small sink, wash the clothes on the washboard in the yard, scrubbing against the stone until my knuckles were red. I would hang Richard's shirts in the sun and feel important. I was a wife. I took care of my man. I had my own house. In the afternoons, I would sit at my quilting frame and embroider colorful flowers, birds, traditional Appalachian patterns that my grandmother had taught me. Each stitch was a meditation. The colored threads intertwined under my fingers and became beauty. I dreamed of having enough finished blouses to sell at the market, of earning my own money, of helping Richard save up for our own house. The afternoons grew sweeter when I knew he was about to arrive. I would tidy myself up a bit, put on my prettiest blouse, comb my braid, and prepare his dinner with care. When I heard his footsteps on the street, my heart would leap with joy. We would have dinner together, talking about the day. He would tell me about the print shop, about the jobs that came in, about the lead letters that were arranged to form words. I would tell him about what I had embroidered, about the neighbors I had met, about the small events of my day. They were simple conversations, but for me, they were pure gold. Someone was listening to me. Someone was interested in what I had to say. The nights were ours. We learned to know each other, to love each other. Richard was affectionate, attentive. He made me feel special, desired, important. I, who had been invisible my whole life, was suddenly the center of someone's world. The first week passed in that bubble of happiness. Looking back, it was a beautiful, perfect lie, a sweet poison that I drank willingly before the bitterness took hold. But in the second week, something changed. It was a Thursday afternoon. I had gone to the market to buy tomatoes, onions, and peppers for dinner. I was at Mrs. Gable's stall, picking the reddest tomatoes, when I heard voices behind me. "That's Richard Walker's new wife," said a woman's voice. Not very loud, but loud enough for me to hear. "Really?" another voice replied. "Poor thing. So young." "Yes," just like the other one. I froze with a tomato in my hand. The other one. What other one? Do you think she knows? The first voice continued. Of course not. Look at her. She looks like she wouldn't hurt a fly. Richard is an expert at picking the naive ones. The voices moved away with giggles. I stood there, my heart pounding. I wanted to turn around to see who they were, but something stopped me. Fear, maybe, or denial. What's wrong, honey? Mrs. Gable asked me. You've gone pale. Nothing. I'm fine. I lied. How much do I owe you? I paid quickly and left the market, almost running. The words of those women bounced around in my head. The other one. Just like the other one. Do you think she knows? When I got home, I sat at the table, trying to calm down. It was just gossip, I told myself. The town is full of gossipy old women with nothing better to do. They must have confused Richard with someone else, or were making things up out of pure malice. I decided not to say anything to Richard that night. I didn't want him to think I was the type to listen to market gossip. I had dinner with him as if nothing had happened. I smiled, I talked, but something had changed inside me. A small seed of doubt had been planted. Sometimes we do that, don't we? We choose the sweet lie because the truth feels like a cliff's edge. That day, Patricia wasn't ready to look down, but the ground beneath her was already starting to crumble. Stay with her as she tries to hold on to a world that's quickly fading away. The following days I tried to forget what I had heard, but it was like a splinter buried under my skin. It was there, nagging, even though I wanted to ignore it. And then, strange things started to happen. The first was that Richard came home late one Tuesday. Dinner was already cold when he showed up. Sorry, my love, he said, kissing me quickly on the cheek. There was an urgent job at the print shop, a big order that has to go out early tomorrow. Oh, that's okay, I said, although a little voice inside me asked, is that true? I heated his dinner, watched him eat. He seemed tired, distracted. When I asked more about the urgent job, he was vague. Government paperwork, nothing interesting. And he changed the subject quickly. 2 days later, he came home late again, and then again the following Monday, each time with explanations that sounded reasonable. Extra work, a complicated project, a demanding client. I wanted to believe him. I tried hard to believe him, but the voices from the market were still there. The other one, poor thing. One morning I was at the market buying cornmeal for the cornbread when Mrs. Peterson, the one who sells medicinal herbs, called me over. Patty, come here, honey. I went to her stall. It smelled of rosemary, of rue, of all the herbs she sold. How are you, Mrs. Peterson? Fine, fine. Tell me, how's married life? Does your husband treat you well? Yes, very well. Richard is very good to me. Mrs. Peterson looked at me with those eyes that seemed to see more than you wanted to show. Richard Walker, right? Yes. She pursed her lips. That name sounds familiar. I've heard it around here before. My stomach tightened. Oh, really? Where? I don't remember exactly, honey. You know how it is when you get old. The memory isn't what it used to be. But I could swear someone told me about a Richard Walker a while ago. Or maybe I'm mistaken. She was quiet for a moment, as if searching her memory. Do you know him from around here? No, he lived more towards the city center. We met at church. Ah, well, then I'm probably mistaken. But there was something in her look that said she wasn't mistaken. I left there with my hands trembling. That name again. That feeling again, that there was something I didn't know. That afternoon, when Richard came home, I watched him differently, as if seeing him for the first time. Who was this man, really? We had been married for a month, and suddenly I realized I knew almost nothing about him. I didn't know where he was born exactly. I had never met his family. He never mentioned them. I didn't know where he had lived before he met me. All our months of courtship had been about the present and the future, never about the past. Richard, I said as we had dinner, I realized you've never told me about your family. Where do your parents live? Something changed in his face. Just for a second, but I saw it. His shoulders tensed. They died when I was young. I don't have any family. Oh, I'm sorry. And siblings? Cousins? I don't have anyone, he said in a sharp voice. That's why you're so important to me. You're my only family now. It sounded nice, but it was also convenient, wasn't it? Having no family meant I would never meet anyone who could tell me about his past. And friends? I insisted. There must be people from your work or from before. Patricia, why so many questions? He asked with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Does the past even matter? What matters is the present. You and me, our future together. I fell silent, but not because I was convinced. I fell silent because I saw something in his eyes that scared me, a hardness I hadn't seen before. The days went on, and Richard's absences became more frequent. One Friday, he didn't come home to sleep. I waited all night, sick with worry. Had something happened to him? An accident? I wanted to go look for him, but I didn't know exactly where the print shop was. He had always been vague with the details. Downtown, he'd say, near the courthouse square, but that could be anywhere. He arrived on Saturday afternoon with expensive red roses. Forgive me, my love. The work went on so long that I ended up sleeping at the print shop. I didn't want to arrive in the middle of the night and scare you. Sleeping at the print shop? I asked. On the floor? We have some cots for when there are night shifts. It's not comfortable, but when work is pressing, you have to make sacrifices. It sounded reasonable, but something in me didn't quite believe him anymore. The following week was worse. He only came home to sleep 3 nights. Monday, Wednesday, and Sunday. The other 4 nights, he simply didn't show up. Each time with the same story. Urgent work, night shifts, projects that couldn't wait. And I started to notice more things. When I checked his pants to wash them, I found strange things. Receipts from places I didn't know, a diner on the other side of town, a store far from his work. Once I found a bus ticket with a date and time from when he was supposed to be at the print shop. But every time I thought about asking him, I stopped. What if I was just being paranoid? What if the market gossip had put ideas in my head? I didn't want to be that distrustful, jealous wife who checks her husband's pockets and makes scenes. Besides, what would I say? I heard some ladies at the market talking about you. It would sound ridiculous. Richard would laugh. He'd tell me not to listen to gossip, and I'd look like a fool. But the gossip didn't stop. Every time I went to the market, I felt stares. I heard whispers that would stop when I walked by. I saw women nudging each other and looking at me with something that looked like pity. One afternoon, Mrs. Brown, the one who sold sweet rolls, called me over. Patricia, come, try these fresh out of the oven cinnamon rolls. I approached. She gave me a still warm roll. How are you doing, honey? Fine, thank you, Mrs. Brown. And your husband? Everything okay with him? Yes, everything's fine. She looked at me with a serious face. Look, I don't know if I should be telling you this, but you're a good girl, and I don't like to see good girls taken advantage of. My heart started beating faster. What is it? People have been talking about your husband. They say that. Well, that this isn't the first time he's gotten married. There it was. It wasn't hidden voices anymore. Someone was telling me straight to my face. That's just gossip, I said, louder than I intended. People always make things up. Maybe, honey, maybe. I'm just telling you to be careful, to keep your eyes wide open. I left there, almost running. Tears burned my eyes, but I wasn't going to cry there in the middle of the market for all the gossips to have more to talk about. That night, when Richard arrived, I confronted him. Well, not exactly confronted, more like asked softly, with fear. Richard, people at the market have been saying strange things. What things? He asked without looking up from his plate. That you've been married before. He laughed, a laugh that sounded genuine. Really? And why am I not surprised? This town is full of gossips who have nothing better to do than invent stories. So, it's not true? He looked me straight in the eye. Patricia, you are my only wife, my only family. Haven't I shown you that every day? Didn't I give you this house? Didn't I buy you that quilting frame? Don't I treat you with love and respect? Yes, but nothing. They're just envious gossips. Maybe because I'm from out of town. Maybe because they see me well-dressed and think I have money. People make up whatever they want when they don't know you. You know me. You know who I am. I wanted to believe him. God knows I wanted to believe him. And his explanation made sense. Small towns are like that. Someone new arrives and the rumors start. Maybe they were jealous that I had married an educated man with a stable job. You're right, I said finally. I'm sorry for doubting. He hugged me. You don't have to apologize. Just promise me you won't listen to gossip. Trust me, yes. Trust in what we have. And I promised, because I wanted it to be true, because the alternative was too terrible to consider. But the following weeks were strange. Richard came around less and less. His absences were longer and longer, and the gossip continued, stronger, more specific, more impossible to ignore. One morning I felt dizzy. I threw up my breakfast. I thought it was something I ate, but the next day the same thing happened, and the next. And I started to realize something that would change everything. I hadn't gotten my period. I was almost 2 months late. I went to see Mrs. Peterson. She looked at me, touched my stomach, asked me questions, and then smiled. You're expecting, honey. Congratulations. I should have felt happy. A part of me was, I was going to be a mother. I was going to have a child. But another part of me felt pure panic because the gossip was still there, because Richard's absences continued, because something inside me knew that something was wrong, something I didn't want to see. That night I told Richard. I expected him to be happy, to hug me, to celebrate. Instead, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, Are you sure? Mrs. Peterson confirmed it. She says I'm about 2 months along. He nodded slowly. Well, then we'll have to make adjustments. I'm going to have to work more, earn more. A child is expensive. It wasn't the reaction I expected. There was no joy, no excitement, just cold calculations about money. That night I couldn't sleep. The words of the women from the market came back to my head. Poor thing, just like the other one. Do you think she knows? And I realized something terrible. I didn't want to know. A part of me was clinging to ignorance because the truth would be worse. But another part, a stronger and growing part, needed to know if Richard was lying to me. If there was something I didn't know, I needed to find out, especially now that I was expecting his child. In that moment, it wasn't the weak girl Patricia anymore. It was a mother. I realized that I couldn't build a life for my child on a foundation of lies. No matter how painful the truth was, it was still more solid than any beautiful lie. I made a decision that night. I was going to investigate. I was going to follow him. I was going to discover the truth, whatever the cost. Because something told me that the gossip wasn't just gossip, that the women at the market knew something I didn't, and that my perfect life was built on lies that were about to come crashing down. The days after discovering I was pregnant were strange. I should have been floating with happiness, preparing baby clothes, dreaming about the future. Instead, I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, knowing that at any moment something would push me. The morning sickness was terrible. I would wake up running to the bathroom. I would vomit until there was nothing left in my stomach. Richard looked at me with an annoyed expression, more than concerned. Again, he would say, try to control yourself, as if I could control what my body was doing. But the worst part wasn't the nausea. The worst part was the growing certainty that something was very wrong with my marriage. The market gossip was no longer vague whispers. It was becoming more specific, more detailed, more impossible to ignore. One morning, about a week after learning about the pregnancy, I went to the market for parsley and peppers for the stew. Mrs. Davis, the one who sold vegetables, called me over with an urgent gesture. Patricia, come here, quick. I approached. She looked around to make sure no one was listening. Look, honey, I don't know if I should tell you this, but if you were my daughter, I'd want someone to tell me. My heart started to beat faster. What is it, Mrs. Davis? Your husband, Richard. I've seen him. Where? In the nearby city of Aurora. I have a cousin who lives over there and I visit her every week. And I've seen him, Patricia, twice now, coming in and out of a house, a little house painted blue with flowers in the windows. I grabbed the edge of the stall to keep from falling. Maybe he has work over there, or acquaintances. Mrs. Davis put her hand on my arm. Honey, I saw him with a woman with a baby in her arms, and children, 2 little kids who called him Dad. The world stopped. There it was. It was no longer vague gossip. It was someone who had seen it with her own eyes. Someone telling me directly. It has to be a mistake, I whispered. Maybe it's his brother or a cousin. Patricia. Mrs. Davis looked at me with so much pity that I wanted to run. He kissed them, the woman and the children. He hugged them. He walked into that house like someone coming home. It wasn't a visit. It was family. I walked away from there without buying anything. My legs could barely hold me up. I walked the streets aimlessly. Mrs. Davis's words bounced in my head. A woman, a baby. Children who called him Dad. No, no, no. There had to be an explanation. Richard loved me. He had given me a house, a quilting frame. He had promised me a future. Why would he do all that if he already had another family? But the little voice in my head already knew the answer. It had known since the first whispers of gossip, but I hadn't wanted to listen. When I got home, I sat on the kitchen floor and cried. I cried for myself, for the baby growing in my womb, for the life I thought I had and that perhaps never existed. I needed proof. I couldn't go on with just gossip and what others claimed to have seen. I needed to know for sure. I got up and started searching. First, his clothes. I checked every pocket of every pair of pants, every shirt. I found receipts. One from a diner called The Good Taste in the Aurora neighborhood, another from a fabric store in the same area, bus tickets with destinations that had nothing to do with his work. Then I looked in the drawers he used, shirts, socks, underwear. At the very bottom, under everything, I found something, a small, yellowish, wrinkled envelope, as if someone had read it many times. With trembling hands, I took it out. There was no name on the outside. It was just carefully sealed. I broke the seal. Inside was a letter. The handwriting was a woman's, elegant, educated. It began, Richard, my love. My love. Another woman called him, my love. I kept reading, though each word was like a knife. The children miss you terribly. Michael asks me every day when you're coming back. Jessica doesn't sleep well without you. The baby, our little Daniel, is growing so fast. He can already lift his little head. He looks so much like you. Michael, Jessica, Daniel, names. Real children with names. Not just some children, as Mrs. Davis had said. Specific children who missed their dad. I know work keeps you busy, the letter continued. I know the shifts at the print shop are necessary to support the family, but please, my love, at least come see us this weekend, even if it's just for a few hours. The children need their father, and I need you. Your wife who loves you, Susan. Your wife. The letter fell from my hands. I stared at it on the floor as if it were a poisonous snake. Wife. He had a wife. A real wife named Susan with 3 children. Michael, Jessica, and Daniel. A whole family. And me? What was I? What were the baby and I? I doubled over, clutching my stomach. The nausea returned, but this time it wasn't from the pregnancy. It was from pure horror, from disgust, from pain. How was it possible? How does someone get married when they already have a wife and children? How did he look me in the eyes every day knowing it was all a lie? This was the moment the whispers from the market became a scream. It was no longer a vague fear. It was a name, Susan, and 3 children whose lives were as real as her own. Patricia's perfect life was not just a lie. It was a story someone else had already written. What she does next will change everything. I later learned that what Richard did has a name. It's called bigamy. It's when a man marries 2 women at the same time. It's a crime. It's illegal. But at that moment, I didn't know those technical terms. I only knew that he had deceived me in the worst possible way. I put the letter back exactly where I had found it. Something told me I couldn't confront him yet. I needed to know more. I needed to be sure. And above all, I needed a plan. Because if I confronted him now, what would happen? Would he throw me out of the house? Would he leave me alone and pregnant? Would he deny everything? The next few days were torture. Acting normal when I was dying inside. Cooking for him, washing his clothes, sleeping in the same bed knowing what I knew. It was like having a knife stuck in my chest and having to pretend it didn't hurt. Richard noticed something was wrong. "Are you okay?" he would ask. "You look pale. Is it the morning sickness?" Yes, I would lie. Just that. One afternoon, about 3 days after finding the letter, another one arrived. Someone had slipped it under the door. When I heard it fall, I ran out, but whoever had left it was already gone. I picked it up. The envelope said, "For Richard's new wife," in a woman's handwriting. With trembling hands, I opened it. Inside was a short note. "If you want to know the truth about the man you married, go to the Aurora neighborhood, 147 Dogwood Street, a house painted blue. Go on a Monday or Friday morning. You'll see things you need to see. A friend." I sat on the floor with the note in my hands. Someone knew. Someone was helping me. Who? Mrs. Davis? Mrs. Peterson? Some other woman from the market who felt sorry for me? It didn't matter who. To this day, I still don't know who that was. Perhaps it was one of the women from the market. But in my heart of hearts, I believe it was another woman, one who had known her own share of sorrow and couldn't bear to see a sister lost to such a lie. What mattered was that I had an address, a specific place where I could see with my own eyes what everyone seemed to know except me. I barely slept that night. I turned it over and over in my head. I had to go. I had to see. Part of me wanted to remain in ignorance. If I didn't see it, I could keep pretending the gossip was a lie, that the letter was old, that everything had an innocent explanation. But the stronger part of me, the part that was growing every day along with the baby in my womb, knew that I needed the truth. Because I was going to be a mother. I was going to bring a child into this world, and that child deserved more than lies. The following Monday, Richard left for work as usual. I gave him his coffee, packed his lunch, and saw him off with a kiss on the cheek. When his footsteps faded down the street, I waited 10 minutes. Then I put my shawl over my head, put on my most comfortable sandals, and left. The bus to Aurora took about half an hour. I sat in the very back, my heart beating so loudly, I thought everyone could hear it. What was I going to find? What was I going to see? When I got to Aurora, I asked for Dogwood Street. An old man pointed, "Straight down here, then a left. It's about 6 blocks. I walked slowly. Partly because I was pregnant and got tired quickly. Partly because I was afraid of what I would find. Dogwood Street was pretty. Modest but well-kept little houses. Trees that surely filled with white blossoms in the spring. Children playing in the street. The smell of food coming from the houses. Number 147 was a house painted sky blue. It had flower boxes in the windows, exactly as Mrs. Davis had said. A large dogwood tree in the front shaded the porch. I hid behind a tree on the corner, about 3 houses away. From there I could see the blue door without being seen. I waited. I don't know how long. Maybe 20 minutes, maybe half an hour. The sun was starting to get hot, and I felt the nausea returning. And then the door opened. A woman came out. She looked to be about 25, more or less my age. Pretty, with black hair tied back in a braid. She was carrying a baby wrapped in a sling, held close to her chest. Behind her came 2 children, a boy about 5 years old and a girl about 3, both with round faces and big eyes. "Be careful crossing the street," the woman told them. Her voice was soft, affectionate. "Michael, hold your sister's hand, Michael." The name from the letter. The real boy had a face, a body, a voice. I watched them walk down the street. The woman greeted neighbors. "Good morning, Mrs. Rose. How's Mr. Peter this morning?" She looked happy. She looked like a normal woman, living her normal life. She looked like I had felt just a few weeks ago. They disappeared around the corner, probably heading to the market. I stood there, clinging to the tree, processing what I had seen. It was real. The woman was real. The children were real. This house, this life, this family were real. But I still hadn't seen Richard. Maybe he was just a friend of this family. Maybe he was helping them with money. Maybe there was an explanation I wasn't seeing. I decided to stay, to wait longer, to see if he would appear. An hour passed, then 2. The sun climbed higher in the sky. My stomach rumbled with hunger, but I didn't dare move. The nausea came and went. I sat on the ground under the tree, half hidden by the bushes. And then, around 11 inches the morning, I saw him. Richard turned the corner, walking quickly. He was carrying a package in his hands. He looked relaxed, happy. He reached the blue house and took a key out of his pocket. A key. He had a key to that house. He opened the door and went inside, like someone coming home. I was paralyzed. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I could only stare at that blue door closed behind him. 15 minutes later, the door opened again. Richard came out with the 5-year-old boy on his shoulders. The boy was laughing, holding onto Richard's hair. The woman came out behind them with the baby and the little girl. They all looked happy, like a family from a calendar. "Where are we going, Dad?" the boy asked from up high. "To buy some donuts," Richard replied. "To celebrate that your dad has the day off." A day off. He had told that family he had the day off. He had told me he had urgent work at the print shop. I watched them walk down the street. A perfect family. Richard with the boy on his shoulders, the woman by his side with the baby, the little girl holding his hand, laughing, talking, living their lives. And there I was, hidden behind a tree, with a baby growing in my belly, watching my husband have a whole other life without me. It still wasn't enough. Something inside me was still trying to deny it. Maybe they were cousins. Maybe it was a strange but explainable situation. I waited for them to return. About half an hour later, they came back with bags of pastries. They all went into the house. Through the open window, I could hear voices, laughter. The smell of fresh coffee reached me where I was. I stayed there until the sun began to set, until my legs grew numb, until the nausea was so strong I thought I would vomit right there in the street. Richard didn't come out again. He stayed in that house. His house, with his family. His real family. I finally got up. I walked back to the bus stop like a zombie. I got on, paid my fare, sat down. The bus moved through the streets, and I stared out the window without seeing anything. In my mind, only one question circled. If they are his real family, what am I? It's a question that cuts deeper than any betrayal. In that single moment, hiding behind a tree, Patricia wasn't just a wife who had been cheated on. She was a woman whose entire identity had been erased. But even in that darkness, a flicker of resolve was born, a need to know for sure, no matter the cost. When I got to my house, it was already getting dark. I went in and collapsed onto the kitchen floor. I had no strength to stand. I had no strength for anything. Richard didn't come home that night. Of course not. He was at his other house, with his other wife, with his other children. I stayed there on the floor until everything went dark. Then I dragged myself to bed and lay down without taking off my clothes. I hadn't seen a document that said, "Richard Walker is married to Susan." I hadn't heard him say, "I have another family." But I had seen it with my own eyes. Him living another life. A life where I didn't exist. And now I had to decide what to do with that information. Because it was one thing to suspect, and another thing entirely to know. But first, I needed to be absolutely sure. I needed to see it again. I needed to eliminate any possible doubt. Because if I was going to destroy my life by confronting him, if I was going to admit to my family that I had married a liar, if I was going to raise my child alone, I needed to be 100% sure of what I had seen. So I decided to go back one more time. The next time, I would arrive earlier, I would see more, and then I would make the hardest decision of my life. 3 days passed before I dared to go back. 3 days of pretending to be normal while I was falling apart inside. Richard came to sleep one night, on Tuesday. He arrived late, ate what I had prepared for him, and fell asleep with his back to me. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, with this man beside me who seemed more and more like a stranger. On Thursday, I decided it was time. Richard had said he had a night shift at the print shop, that he wouldn't be home to sleep. Perfect. I would go to Aurora early, very early. I would see the family's entire routine, and this time, I would leave with no doubts. I got up while the sun was still low on the horizon. The morning sickness hit me as soon as my feet touched the floor. I vomited, washed my face with cold water, and forced myself to eat some toast with beans. I needed strength for what was to come. I put on my simplest clothes, an old blouse, my most worn-out shawl. I wanted to go unnoticed. I tied the shawl over my head and left when the streets were still half empty. The bus to Aurora was full of early morning workers, men going to their day jobs, women going to clean other people's houses. I sat by the window and watched the streets go by as the sun rose completely. I arrived in the Aurora neighborhood around 7 inches the morning. Everything was waking up. Ladies sweeping their sidewalks, children in school uniforms leaving their houses, the smell of coffee and bacon filling the air. I walked slowly to Dogwood Street. This time I didn't hide behind the tree on the corner. This time I found a better spot, a bench in a small park, diagonally across from the blue house. From there, I had a perfect view of the door, the windows, everything, but I just looked like a lady resting on a bench. I sat and waited. At 7:30, the blue door opened. The older boy, Michael, came out in his school uniform. Behind him was the woman, Susan, with the baby in her arms. The little girl, Jessica, was holding on to her mother's skirt. "You be good at school," Susan told Michael. "And don't forget your sandwich for recess." "Okay, Mom." The boy gave her a kiss and ran off down the street, his little backpack bouncing on his back. Susan stood in the doorway for a moment, rocking the baby. She looked tired. She had dark circles under her eyes. Her hair was a bit messy. Her apron was stained. She looked just like I did every morning after a night of nausea. She went back into the house. Through the open window, I could see her moving around the kitchen, putting water on to boil, washing dishes, the same things I did every morning in my house. An hour passed, then 2. I was still sitting on the bench, ignoring the curious glances of some neighbors who passed by. An older lady sat down next to me. "Good morning, dear," she greeted me. "Are you waiting for someone?" "Yes, a cousin," I lied. "She told me she'd meet me here, but she's running late." "Ah, well, I'm Mrs. Nelson. I live right here on the corner. Does your cousin live around here?" "Yes, nearby." I didn't want to give more details, but Mrs. Nelson was one of those people who liked to chat. This is a quiet neighborhood. Good people. Lately, there's been something strange with the Walker family. My heart skipped a beat. The Walker family? Yes. The family that lives in that blue house across the street, see it? Richard Walker and his wife Susan. There it was. A neighbor confirming it. Richard Walker and his wife Susan. "What's strange about it?" I asked, trying to keep my voice normal. "Well, you see, Richard is hardly ever around. You used to see him every day, leaving for work in the morning, coming back in the afternoon. But about 6 months ago, he started being gone more and more. Sometimes he's gone for days on end. Poor Susan. You can tell she misses him. And the kids, too. Michael asked me the other day if I knew where his dad was." "Mrs." Nelson shook her head. "I told him it was probably work, but between you and me, I think the scoundrel has another woman somewhere." I froze. Even the neighbors suspected it. "How terrible," I managed to say. "Yes, very terrible. Susan is a good girl. She doesn't deserve that. But that's how men are, right? Never satisfied with what they have at home." Mrs. Nelson stood up with an effort. "Well, dear, I hope your cousin arrives soon. Take care." She left, leaving me with the confirmation I needed. Even the neighbors knew that Richard Walker lived there, that he was Susan's husband, that he had children with her. Around 11 inches the morning, I saw movement at the blue house. The door opened, and Susan came out again, this time without the baby. She was carrying a basket. It looked like she was going to the market. I waited for her to turn the corner. Then, without thinking too much, because if I thought about it, I wouldn't do it, I got up and walked towards the blue house. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. What was I doing? This was crazy. But I needed to see. I needed to know more. I approached the window. The curtains were half open. I peeked in carefully. The inside of the house looked like mine. Small, modest, but clean and tidy. A table with 4 chairs, an old sofa but with embroidered cushions. There were photos on the walls. I stretched to see better. They were family photos. Richard with Susan on their wedding day, both young, maybe 18 or 19 years old. Richard with baby Michael in his arms. Susan pregnant. The whole family together at what looked like a Christmas party. Photos of years of life together, of family, of shared history, and in an instant I saw framed documents. I moved closer, squinting to read. It was a marriage certificate. Richard Walker and Susan Miller, married at the Street Phillip Church, Aurora, Illinois, the 15th of February 1969, 7 years ago. Richard had been married to Susan for 7 years before he met me. I also saw framed birth certificates. Michael born in 1970, Jessica in 1973, Daniel in 1975. It was all there, all the evidence, all the truth I hadn't wanted to see. There it was, framed on the wall, the undeniable proof. With this, there was no more room for doubt, no more space for denial. Patricia now stood at a terrible crossroads, forced to accept a truth that would shatter her world, and decide how she was going to build a new one from the pieces. "What are you doing?" I turned around, startled. It was a neighbor, looking at me suspiciously from the street. I'm looking for my cousin, Susan," I improvised, "but it seems she's not home." "Cousin Susan? She's never mentioned having any cousins." "Distant cousin," I said, backing away. "I'll come back later." I hurried away before the woman could ask more questions. I walked for several blocks without direction, processing what I had seen. There was no doubt. None. Richard had been married to Susan since 1969. They had 3 children together. They had a house, a life, a history. And then, in mid-1975, nearly 7 years after marrying Susan, he had shown up at my church. He courted me for 6 months, and we were married the following spring of 1976. That meant that when he was courting me, when he was talking about eternal love, when he was asking my dad for permission to visit me, he had a pregnant wife waiting for him at home. Susan was pregnant with Daniel when Richard met me. I sat down on a different bench on another street, far from the blue house. The nausea hit me hard. I threw up in some bushes. A lady saw me and approached, concerned. "Are you all right, dear? Do you need help?" "I'm pregnant," I explained, wiping my mouth. "It's just the morning sickness." "Oh, you poor thing. Do you have any water? Have you had a good breakfast?" "Yes, thank you. It'll pass." "Does your husband know you're out here alone? You should be at home resting." My husband. That word that once filled me with pride now made me sick. "He's working," I said. "He's always working." The lady left, and I sat there, one hand on my belly where a baby was growing. The baby of a man who already had 3 children. The baby of a man who had lied to me about everything. What was I going to do now? That was the question drilling into my head. I had all the evidence. I knew the truth. But now what? I couldn't go back to my parents. Imagine the shame. Dad, Mom, I married a man who was already married. My dad would kill me. Or worse, he'd force me to stay with Richard anyway, because legally we were married in the eyes of the church. I couldn't stay silent either, live the rest of my life as the secret second wife, raise my child in that lie. And Susan, poor Susan, who knew nothing, who thought her husband worked night shifts, who waited patiently for him to come home. Did I have to tell her, destroy her life too? I sat on that bench until the sun began to set. People passed by. Life went on as normal for everyone but me. For me, the world had ended, and no one else knew. I finally got up and walked to the bus stop. When I got to my house, it was already dark. Richard wasn't there, as expected. He was at his other house with his other family. I went in and stood in the middle of the living room. This little house that I had thought was mine, this home that I had thought was real, was all part of his deception. He had put me here like someone keeps a piece of furniture in storage, something to use when it's convenient. I sat at the table and took out a piece of paper and a pencil. I needed to think clearly. I needed to make a plan. Option 1, confront him, tell him I knew everything, demand an explanation. And then what? Divorce him? Could I even get a divorce if our marriage was illegal from the start? Option 2, leave, pack my things and disappear. But where to? I had no money. I had no family who would support me without judgment. I was pregnant. Who would give me a job in this condition? Option 3. Stay silent. Continue living the lie. Raise my child as if everything were normal, sharing my husband with another woman without either of us officially knowing. All 3 options were terrible. There was no good way out. It was like being trapped in a room with no doors. Richard arrived on Friday night. He came in whistling, in a good mood. He kissed me on the cheek as if nothing was wrong. How are my wife and my baby? His wife, singular, as if Susan didn't exist. Fine, I lied. Everything's fine. We ate in silence. I watched him. This man who ate my biscuits, who slept in my bed, who had put a baby in my womb. Who was he really? After 7 months of knowing him, after 2 months of marriage, I realized I didn't know him at all. Patricia, are you sure you're okay? He asked. You've seemed strange lately. It's the pregnancy, I said. It makes me tired. You should rest more. Not be out on the street so much. He paused. Where were you yesterday? I saw you leave early. My heart leaped into my throat. He had seen me. He knew I had followed him. I went to the market and then to visit my mom. The lie came easily. I was learning to lie too. He looked at me, as if sizing me up. Be careful. I don't want anything to happen to you. Not to you or the baby. Do you care about us? It slipped out. Do you really care about us? Of course. You're my wife. That baby is my child. Why would you ask that? I was about to say everything right then and there, to throw what I knew in his face, to scream liar, cheat, scoundrel at him. But something stopped me, a survival instinct. If I confronted him without a plan, what would he do? Would he throw me out of the house? Would he threaten me? He had already proven he was capable of lying for months. What else was he capable of? For no reason, I finally said. It's just the pregnancy hormones. They make me sentimental. He seemed to accept that explanation. He finished his dinner and went to bed. I stayed in the kitchen a while longer, looking out the window at the dark night. At that moment, I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront him yet. First, I needed to save money, even if it was just a little. I needed to have options. Because if I faced him now, without resources, without a plan, without anything, I would end up worse off than I already was. The following days, I worked like a madwoman. I finished 3 quilts I had half done. I embroidered like never before. My fingers flew over the fabric, creating flowers, birds, traditional designs. Each stitch was a step towards my freedom. I took the quilts to the market. Mrs. Scott, who had a craft stall, bought them all. She didn't give me much, but it was something. I saved the money in a small bag that I hid at the bottom of my clothes trunk. I made more quilts, embroidered shawls, made napkins with Appalachian patterns. I sold everything, and I saved all the money. Richard gave me money for household expenses, but he never asked what I did with my time. He probably thought I was incapable of doing anything without him. A month passed, then another. My belly grew. The nausea finally went away, but other discomforts came. My back ached. I got tired easily. But I kept sewing, kept selling, kept saving money. Richard came 3 or 4 times a week, same as always. I acted normal. I cooked for him, washed his clothes, slept by his side. On the outside, the perfect wife. On the inside, I was dead. One night, when I was about 5 months pregnant, Richard came home later than usual. He smelled of alcohol. He had had a few drinks with who knows who. He sat down heavily in the chair. Patricia, we need to talk. That's the moment a victim becomes a survivor. When instinct takes over and you realize that silence is a weapon. For months, Patricia has been playing the part of the perfect wife, all while secretly weaving an escape plan, one thread at a time. And now, the man she's been planning against sits down and says they need to talk. Has her secret been discovered, or is his about to be revealed? My heart sped up. He knew that I knew. He had discovered my investigations. About what? About the baby. When it's born, you're going to need money. A lot of money. Doctors, clothes, diapers, all that costs. I know. Well, I need you to understand that I'm not going to be able to be here as much as before. I'm going to have to work more shifts, more overtime. I might go weeks without coming. Weeks. Of course, because he would be at his other house with his other family. I understand, I said. He looked at me, genuinely surprised. I thought you were going to make a scene. No. I know you have to work. We'll be fine. He seemed relieved. He probably thought I was submissive, obedient, that I would accept anything he said. He didn't know that I was planning, that every quilt I sewed was a step toward my escape, that every dollar I saved was a seed of freedom. But it still wasn't enough. I needed more money. I needed a place to go. And above all, I needed courage. The courage to destroy everything I knew so I could start over. Because one thing was clear. I couldn't keep living like this. I couldn't raise my child in a lie. I couldn't be the secret wife of a man who had deceived me from the beginning. I was going to get out of this. I didn't know how or when, but I was going to do it. For me, for my baby, for the life we deserved to have. A life without lies. A real life. The following months were the strangest of my life. On the outside, everything seemed normal. A pregnant woman waiting for her baby, sewing in her house, going to the market. But inside, I was a different person. A person who was planning, calculating, waiting for the right moment. My belly grew, and with it, my determination grew. Every little kick I felt from my baby reminded me why I had to get out of that situation. This child was not going to grow up in a lie. He was not going to have a father who showed up 3 times a week and disappeared the rest of the time. He was not going to live in the shadows of the other family. I continued to sew like crazy. My fingers were calloused. Sometimes they would bleed from working the needles so much, but I couldn't stop. Every blouse, every shawl, every embroidered napkin was money, and money was my ticket out. Mrs. Scott at the market noticed. "Patty, you're bringing in a lot of work lately. Do you need money?" "I'm saving up for when the baby is born," I lied. "Everything costs so much." "That's the truth. But take care of yourself, honey. Don't get sick from working so much." But I couldn't stop. When Richard wasn't there, I would sew from sunup to sundown. My eyes burned, my back ached, but I kept going. I had already saved about $300. It wasn't much, but it was something. One day, when I was almost 7 months pregnant, something happened that changed everything. I was at the market selling some blouses when I saw a woman staring at me. She was young, about my age, pretty, with her hair in a braid. She was carrying a baby in her arms. My stomach dropped. It was her, Susan, Richard's other wife. She approached slowly. I stood there, paralyzed. What was she doing here? Had she followed me? Did she know who I was? "Excuse me," she said in a soft voice. "Are you Patricia?" I couldn't deny it. My name was on the tags of the blouses I sold. "Yes. I need to talk to you. Can we sit down?" My heart was beating so hard I thought it would burst out of my chest. I nodded, unable to speak. We sat on a bench near the market. The baby in her arms slept peacefully. I looked at that baby, Daniel, Richard's youngest. My baby and that baby were half-siblings. They shared the same blood, the same lying father. "I know who you are," Susan said finally. "I know you're married to Richard. How?" "A neighbor saw you near my house," she told me. At first, I didn't believe her. I thought it was a mistake, but I started to investigate. I asked around and found out that Richard had gotten married again. Her eyes filled with tears. "I found out 2 months ago. For 2 months, I've been living with this." "I didn't know," I said quickly. "I didn't know he was already married. He lied to me. He told me he had no family." "I know." Susan wiped her tears with the back of her free hand. "I know he deceived you too. That's why I wanted to talk to you. Because we are both victims of the same man." We were quiet for a moment. The market bustled around us with normal life, but the two of us were in a bubble of shared pain. "When did you marry him?" I asked. 7 years ago. I was 18, he was 19. We met at church, just like you, I suppose. He courted me, asked for my hand. We got married. The first few years were good, very good. Michael was born, then Jessica. We were happy. She rocked the baby as she spoke. But about a year ago, Richard started to change. He was away more, came home less. He said it was work, but I started to suspect. Why did he marry me if he already had a family? It came from my soul. Because I'm a fool, said a voice behind us. We both spun around. Richard was standing there. How long had he been there? How much had he heard? His face was red with anger. What the hell are you two doing? Did you team up to ruin my life? You ruined ours, Susan said, standing up. The baby woke up and started to cry. How could you, Richard? How could you marry another woman while I was waiting for you at home? While your children were asking for you? It's not what you think, he started to say. Oh, no? I stood up too, though my legs were trembling. You didn't marry me knowing you already had a wife and kids. You didn't lie to me for 7 months. People were starting to turn, to stop, to listen. Richard noticed and lowered his voice. Let's go somewhere else. We're not going to make a scene here. Why not? Susan said, louder. Are you ashamed? Are you worried that people will find out what kind of man you are? Susan, shut up. Patricia, let's go home. Which home? Susan asked. Mine or hers? Or do you have others we don't know about? Richard grabbed her arm. I told you to shut up. Let go of me. Susan pulled away. Don't you ever touch me again. Go with her if you care so much. I don't want you in my house anymore. I don't want your lies anymore. Me neither, I said, finding my voice. I don't want you near me or my baby. Richard looked at both of us. I saw panic in his face. He was losing control of the situation. The 2 women he had kept separate, ignorant, were now together, knowing the truth. You're both crazy, he finally said. Crazy and ungrateful. I gave you a house, food, money, and this is how you repay me? You gave us lies, I said. Nothing but lies. To hell with both of you, Richard spat and walked away quickly, disappearing into the market crowd. Susan and I stood there. The baby was still crying. Tears were streaming down my cheeks. The whole market was watching us. In a few days, the whole town would be talking about this. I'm sorry, I said to Susan. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I know. I'm sorry too. For you, for me, for our children. She rocked the baby until he calmed down. What are you going to do now? I don't know. And you? I have 3 children to support. I can't just leave. But I can't stay with him either. Not after this. She sighed deeply. My mom lives nearby. I can stay with her for a while I figure things out. I have nowhere to go, I admitted. My family. If they find out about this, they'll disown me. The shame will be too much. Susan looked at me with something like compassion. We were both foolish. We believed in the same man, and look where we are. She was right. We had both been naive. We had believed in pretty promises, in sweet words, in the idea of love, and Richard had used that naivety against us. You know what? Susan said suddenly. He separated us, kept us ignorant so he could control us both. But not anymore. If we're going to get through this, maybe we should help each other instead of hating each other. Help each other how? I don't know yet. But we're 2 women with children. 2 women who need to start over. Maybe together we're stronger. She gave me a piece of paper with an address on it. This is my mom's house. If you need anything, find me there. I don't know what we're going to do, but you don't have to be alone in this. She left with her baby, leaving me with that piece of paper in my hand. An offer of an alliance from the woman who should be my enemy, the other wife. But she was right. Richard had turned us into rivals when we should have been allies. I walked back to my house slowly. My belly was heavy, my feet hurt, and my mind wouldn't stop spinning. Richard didn't come back that night, or the next. A week went by without him appearing. I half expected him to show up at any moment. Furious, violent, maybe, but he didn't come. The money he left me ran out. I had to use what I had saved to buy food. My secret stash started to dwindle, and with it, my hopes. One afternoon, about 10 days after the encounter at the market, someone knocked on my door. It was Susan. Can I come in? I let her in. She was carrying a basket of food, bread, beans, a little chicken. I figured you wouldn't have much, she said. Richard hasn't been back to my house either, or sent any money. I think he's decided to punish us both. How are you managing? My mom is helping me, but she doesn't have much. I'm looking for work, but nobody wants to hire a woman with 3 small children. She sat at my table. That's why I came. I have an idea. What idea? Your sewing is beautiful. I'm a very good cook. What if we sell food at the market? Casseroles, chili, whatever. And you sell your embroidery. We pool the money, help each other out. Why would you help me? I asked. I'm the woman your husband cheated on you with, because neither of us chose this, because we both have children to care for, and because I can't do it alone. Susan looked me straight in the eye. Hate me if you want. I could hate you too. But hate isn't going to feed us. Vengeance isn't going to support our children. Most people would think they should have been enemies. But hate is a luxury you can't afford when your children are hungry. In that moment, they weren't rivals. They were 2 survivors on the same battlefield, and they made a choice that would define the rest of their lives. She was right. It made all the sense in the world. Okay, I said. Let's try it. And that's how our impossible partnership began, the 2 wives of the same man, working together to survive. Susan started selling casseroles at the market. I continued with my embroidery. We pooled the money and divided it according to how much each of us needed. It wasn't much, but it was something. The days turned into weeks. My pregnancy progressed. I was already 8 months along. The baby could be born at any moment. Richard still hadn't appeared. I half expected him to show up eventually, to apologize maybe, or to make demands, but he didn't. Better this way, Susan would say. We don't need him. But the truth was more complicated. Legally, we were still married to him. We couldn't get divorced. Well, Susan probably could, but my marriage wasn't even legally real. How do you divorce a fake marriage? One night, when I was almost 8.5 months pregnant, the police came to my door. Patricia Walter? Yes, that's me. We need to ask you some questions about Richard Walker. My heart sank to my stomach. What happened? Is he dead? No, he's been arrested for bigamy. Someone filed a formal complaint. We need your testimony. Susan. It had to be Susan. She had gone to the police. She had reported Richard. The police asked me questions. I told them everything. How we met, how he married me, how I found out the truth. I showed them my marriage certificate, gave them the dates, the places, the details. This is a clear case of bigamy, one of the officers said. Mr. Walker is going to jail, but you'll have legal problems too, ma'am. Marrying a married man, even without knowing it, makes you an accomplice in the eyes of the law. An accomplice? But I didn't know. I know, and that will help your case. But you'll have to testify, and your marriage to him will be annulled. It was never legal anyway. They left, leaving me with more questions than answers. Richard was in jail. My marriage was going to be annulled. I was going to have to testify at a trial. And I was about to give birth. Everything was falling apart. Or maybe it was finally being set right. I wasn't sure. 2 days later, the contractions started. Susan took me to the midwife. It was 12 hours of labor, 12 hours of pain like I had never felt before. But when I finally heard that first cry, when they placed my baby in my arms, everything changed. It was a girl. A perfect little girl with a wrinkled face and tiny clenched fists. My daughter. What are you going to name her? The midwife asked. I had thought of many names, but at that moment, only one made sense. Hope, I said. Her name will be Hope. Because in the middle of all that darkness, she was the only hope I had. She was the reason to keep fighting, my hope for a new beginning. Susan came to meet her the next day. She brought her 3 children, Michael, Jessica, and little Daniel. She's beautiful, Susan said, holding my baby. She looks like you, thank God. She looks nothing like him. The children looked at the baby with curiosity. Is she our sister? Michael asked. Half-sister, Susan explained. You have the same dad, but different moms. "Where's Dad?" Jessica asked. Susan and I looked at each other. "Dad did some bad things," Susan finally said, "and now he has to pay for them. But you didn't do anything wrong, and neither did this baby, so we're all going to take care of each other." Yes, it was a strange family we were forming. 2 women who had unknowingly shared the same man. 4 children who were siblings without a father, without the normal family structure. But maybe, just maybe, we could create something new, something better, something built on truth instead of lies. The first few days with Hope were hard. My body ached from giving birth. My breasts hurt from nursing. I barely slept at all. But every time I looked at her, every time her little eyes looked at me, I knew it had been worth it. Everything had been worth it for her. Susan helped me a lot. She came every day to see me, brought food, taught me things I didn't know about taking care of babies. With Michael, I was lost too, she would tell me. No one is born knowing how to be a mother. Her mom, Mrs. Ruth, was also incredible. She treated me like I was her daughter too. "You're both victims of the same scoundrel," she would say. "You both deserve support, not judgment." I wish my own family thought the same. My mom came to meet the baby 2 weeks after the birth. I knew it was going to be difficult, but not as difficult as it was. She came alone, without telling me. She knocked on the door on a Tuesday morning. When I opened it and saw her standing there, a lump formed in my throat. "Mom, Patricia." She looked me up and down. "Is it true what they're saying around town?" I didn't have to ask what they were saying. Gossip flies in small towns. Surely everyone already knew that Richard was in jail for bigamy, that I had been the other woman without knowing it, that my marriage was a sham. "Come in, Mom, let's talk." She came in and sat stiffly in the chair. Hope was asleep in a makeshift basket that served as her crib. My mom looked at her, but made no move to pick her up. "Your father is furious," she said directly. "He says you've brought shame on the family. How could you let yourself be deceived like that? That you're a fool." Every word was a knife. "I didn't know, Mom. Richard lied to me. He told me he had no family. You should have asked more questions. You should have investigated before marrying him." Her voice was harsh, without compassion. "Now look, married to a married man. That makes you a what, Mom? Say it, a floozy, a tramp. That's what Dad thinks, right? It's not what we think, it's what everyone thinks. The whole town is talking. Did you see what happened to Walter's daughter? She got involved with a married man. They don't care that you didn't know. They only see the scandal. I'm the victim here," I said, my voice breaking. "Richard deceived me, he lied to me, he played with me. Victim or not, the result is the same. You have a daughter without a legitimate father, an annulled marriage, a ruined reputation." She stood up. "Your father says not to come back to the house, that you're no longer welcome, that he doesn't want to see you until this is sorted out." "How does this get sorted out, Mom? How?" "I don't know, Patricia. I really don't know." For the first time, I saw something like sadness in her eyes. I wish things could have been different. But your father is the man of the house, and I can't go against his word. And what do you think? Not as Dad's wife, but as my mother. What do you think?" She was quiet for a long time. "I think life is unfair to women. I think we always pay for the mistakes of men. I think your baby is innocent, and she's my granddaughter." She finally approached the basket. She looked at Hope, asleep. "She's pretty. She has your eyes. Her name is Hope. A strange name, but pretty." She took a small roll of bills from her purse. "Here. It's what I could save without your father noticing. It's not much, but it will help. Mom, I can't. Take it and take care of yourself. And take care of that little girl." She kissed my forehead quickly, as if it burned her to do so. "I'll try to talk to your father, but it's going to take time. Don't expect him to change his mind soon." She left, leaving me with the money in my hand and a hole in my chest. My own family had rejected me. The shame of what Richard had done was now my shame too. That evening, as I sat in the dark, rocking Hope and feeling a loneliness so profound it felt like a physical weight, there was a soft knock on the door. It was Susan's mother, Mrs. Ruth. She came in carrying a warm casserole and a blanket she had knitted. She didn't say much at first. She just took the baby from my arms, looked at her with tears in her eyes, and said, "She is a child of God, innocent in all of this." Then she looked at me, her gaze filled not with pity, but with a deep, knowing compassion. "Patricia," she said softly, "what that man did does not define you. What your family does in their fear and shame does not define you. You are a mother now. You are strong. And you are not alone. My house is your house. My family will be your family. It's a strange thing, isn't it? Sometimes the people of your own blood turn their backs on you in your darkest hour, and a stranger, with no obligation at all, steps in and becomes your family. That day, I learned that family isn't always blood. Family are the people who stay. In that moment, when my own blood had turned away, a stranger showed me the meaning of grace. She was the first person to see me, not as a scandal, but as a survivor. 2 weeks later, the summons arrived. I had to appear in court for Richard's trial as a key witness. Susan had been summoned too. We agreed to go together. "We'll give each other strength," she said. On the day of the trial, Mrs. Ruth stayed to watch all the children. Susan and I dressed in our best blouses. We braided our hair tightly. We wore clean shawls. We wanted to look respectable, dignified. The courthouse was a large, cold building downtown. There were a lot of people. I recognized some of my neighbors, some from Aurora. They all came to see the spectacle, the gossip made real. We entered the courtroom. It was large, with wooden benches like in a church. At the front was a high desk where the judge Saturday, and there, in a chair with 2 police officers on either side, was Richard. He looked different. Thinner, disheveled, his hair uncombed. He was no longer the elegant man who had courted me. He looked small, defeated. When he saw Susan and me walk in together, something in his face changed. Fear, maybe, or rage. The trial began. The judge read the charges. Bigamy, falsification of documents, marriage fraud. Big, legal words for something very simple. Richard had lied to us both. They called Susan first. I watched her walk to the front, her back straight, her head held high. They made her swear on the Bible to tell the truth. "Are you married to the defendant, Richard Walker?" the judge asked. "Yes, Your Honor. We were married in February of 1969 at St. Philip's Church. And do you have children with him?" 3. Michael, who is 6, Jessica, who is 3, and Daniel, who is 1. "When did you learn that the defendant had entered into a second marriage?" Susan told the whole story. How Richard started being absent more and more. How she became suspicious. How a neighbor told her she had seen him with another woman. How she investigated and discovered the truth. "And how did you feel upon discovering this?" the judge asked. "Destroyed." Susan's voice broke, humiliated, betrayed. "We have been married for 7 years, we have 3 children, a life together. And all that time he was planning to replace me, looking for someone younger, more foolish, easier to manipulate." "That's not true," Richard shouted from his seat. "I never wanted to replace you. I just needed silence," the judge ordered, banging his gavel. "You will speak when you are asked. Continue, ma'am." Susan finished her testimony. She spoke of her children's pain at not seeing their father, of the financial abandonment, of how she had to ask her mother for help to survive. When she finished, they called my name. "Patricia Walter, please come to the front." As I walked to the front, I wasn't the invisible girl, Patricia, any longer. I was Patty. I was a mother. And I knew that the voice I was about to use wasn't just for me. It was for my daughter, for Susan, and for her children, too. It was the voice of the truth. I stood up on trembling legs. I walked to the front, placed my hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. "Did you enter into marriage with the defendant?" the judge asked. "Yes, sir. In April of 1976 at St. Mark's Community Church. Did you know at that time that the defendant was already married?" "No, sir. I knew nothing. He told me he had no family, that his parents were dead, that he was alone in the world." "When did you discover the truth?" "I told everything. From the first whispers of gossip in the market that I didn't want to believe, to Richard's absences, the lies, the excuses, the letter I found, how I followed him and saw his other family, How I confronted Susan in the market, thinking we would have to hate each other. But instead we discovered we were both victims. And how did this deception affect you? The judge asked. That's when the tears I had been holding back finally came. It destroyed me. I was an innocent girl. I had never had a boyfriend. I believed everything he told me. I got married in love, happy, thinking I was going to have a beautiful life. And suddenly, I discovered it was all a lie. That he had another family, that I wasn't his real wife, that my marriage was a sham, that my baby was going to be born without a legitimate father. Your baby? Yes, sir. I have a 1-month-old daughter. Her name is Hope. She was born after Richard was arrested. He doesn't even know her. The judge wrote something on his papers. Anything else you'd like to add? I looked Richard directly in the eyes. He tried to hold my gaze but couldn't. He looked down. I just want to say that this man did more than break the law. He shattered a soul. He didn't just lie to 2 women. He stole our very identities. He took my name, Patricia Walter, a name my parents gave me, and tied it to a lie so profound that my own family cast me out in shame. He turned me, an innocent girl who dreamed of being a teacher, into a secret he kept in a little house. He turned Susan, a loyal wife and mother, into a fool in the eyes of her neighbors. He didn't just build 2 homes, he built a prison of deceit around all of us. And our children, 4 innocent children, now carry the weight of his sins. So no, this wasn't just bigamy. He didn't just destroy lives. He erased them and forced us to learn how to be born again from the ashes he left behind. As she spoke those words, it wasn't the invisible girl, Patricia, standing there any longer. It was a mother and a survivor. This was the moment she reclaimed her voice, not just for herself, but for her daughter, for Susan, and for all of their children. The verdict was coming, but in many ways, she had already won her freedom. I sat down, my legs unable to support me any longer. Finally, they gave Richard the floor. He stood up. He no longer looked confident as before. He looked scared. I know I made a mistake, he began. But it wasn't with bad intentions. Susan and I were having problems. She got sick after Daniel. She wasn't the same. And I felt lonely. When I met Patricia, I saw a chance to be happy again. Be happy by lying? The judge asked. I didn't think of it that way, I thought. I thought I could keep both families happy. Work harder, earn more, give them both what they needed. I never wanted to hurt anyone. But you did hurt them, the judge said. Both of them and their children. Do you have anything else to say in your defense? Richard fell silent. Then, in a low voice, I'm sorry. To both of you. I'm truly sorry. Sorry doesn't erase 7 months of lies, I said. It doesn't erase the pain. It doesn't give us back our reputation. It doesn't give my daughter a father. The judge stood up. That is sufficient. I will deliver my verdict tomorrow. Court is adjourned. Susan and I left the courthouse. Outside, people were waiting, gossiping, pointing at us. We pushed our way through the crowd with our heads held high. Do you think they'll put him in jail? Susan asked when we were finally alone. I don't know. I hope so. But even if they do, what does that solve? He's still the father of our children. He's going to be in our lives forever, one way or another. She was right. Richard had lost the right to be a father when he chose to lie, to deceive, to destroy. The next day, we returned to the courthouse for the verdict. This time, there were fewer people. The spectacle was over. The judge read his decision. Richard Walker, I find you guilty of bigamy, falsification of documents, and fraud. I sentence you to 3 years in prison. Furthermore, both marriages are hereby annulled. The marriage to Susan Miller will be considered the sole valid marriage for legal purposes, given that it was the first. The marriage to Patricia Walter is annulled retroactively, as if it never existed. As if it never existed. Those words should have hurt me, but instead, I felt relief, freedom. I was no longer tied to that man. I never really was. As for child support, the judge continued, the defendant will be required to provide financial support for all 4 minors upon his release from prison. Until then, The mothers have the right to request assistance from the state. 3 years. Richard would be in prison for 3 years, and then he would have to pay us. It wasn't enough punishment for all the pain he caused, but it was something. When it was all over, when we left the courthouse for the last time, Susan hugged me. It's over. We can finally start over. Is it really over? I asked. The gossip will continue. People will keep talking. Let them talk. I don't care what people say anymore. The only thing that matters is that we know the truth. That we were deceived, that we did nothing wrong, and that we are going to move forward. That night, with Hope asleep in my arms, I thought about everything that had happened. Just 10 months ago, I was a happy girl preparing for my wedding. 10 months later, I was a single mother with an annulled marriage and an ex-husband in prison. My life was nothing like what I had dreamed of. But somehow, I realized that maybe that wasn't such a bad thing. The dreams I had were foolish dreams. To get married, have children, be a housewife, live through a man. Now I had other dreams. To be strong for my daughter, to support myself, to not need any man who could lie to me or control me, to teach Hope that women can be whole without a man by their side. It wasn't going to be easy, but I was going to make it. Of that, I was sure. Because something had changed in me during those terrible months. I had discovered a strength I didn't know I had. A capacity to survive, to fight, to keep going when everything falls apart. Richard had taken a lot from me. My innocence, my trust, my reputation, but he hadn't been able to take the most important thing. My will to live, my will to be more than just a victim. I got up and went to the window. Outside, Geneva slept under the stars. Somewhere, Richard was in a cell, paying for his crimes. Elsewhere, Susan was at her mother's house with her 3 children, also starting over. And I was here, with my daughter in my arms, ready for whatever came next. I was no longer the Patricia who entered that marriage. That Patricia had died the night she discovered the truth. This new Patricia was stronger, wiser, tougher. This Patricia was going to survive. More than that, she was going to thrive. It was only a matter of time. The first few months after the trial were the hardest of my life. Harder even than discovering the truth about Richard, because now I had to rebuild from scratch with a baby who depended completely on me. The money my mom had given me ran out quickly. Hope needed diapers. I needed to eat well to be able to nurse her. The rent had to be paid. I went back to sewing like a madwoman, but with a baby, it was harder. She would cry. She needed attention. She needed to be in my arms. I couldn't spend 12 hours straight sewing like before. Susan helped me a lot. We took turns watching all the children while the other one worked. One day, I would watch all 4 while she made casseroles to sell. The next day, she would stay with all of them while I embroidered. It was exhausting, but it was the only way. The neighbors looked at us strangely. 2 women who had shared the same husband, now living almost like a family. People gossiped. Did you see? Richard's 2 wives are friends now. Isn't that strange? They should hate each other. They're probably plotting their revenge on him for when he gets out. We weren't plotting revenge. We were surviving. That was all. When Hope turned 6 months old, I made a difficult decision. I needed more money than I could make sewing. I needed a real job. I went to see Mrs. Albright, a wealthy lady from downtown who had seen my embroidery at the market. Mrs. Albright, do you need someone to help in your house? I can clean, cook, wash, and I can also embroider tablecloths, napkins, whatever you need. She looked me up and down. Aren't you the girl from the scandal? The one who married the married man? My heart sank, but I kept my head held high. Yes, ma'am, but I didn't know he was married. He deceived me, and now I have a daughter to support. That's a brutal question, isn't it? To have your entire identity reduced to the worst thing that ever happened to you. The old Patricia would have crumbled under the weight of that judgment. But this was Patty, a mother forged in the fire of betrayal. She didn't apologize or make excuses. She simply stated her truth and her purpose. Her entire future now hangs on this one woman's response. Let's find out if this is the new beginning she's been fighting for. She thought for a moment. You can come 3 times a week. Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays from 7 inches the morning to 3 inches the afternoon. I'll pay you $50 a day. $50 a day. $150 a week. It was more than I was making with my sewing. Yes, ma'am, I can. But no bringing your baby, and no being late. I'm very demanding. Understood, ma'am. Thank you. Susan agreed to watch Hope on those days. You help me with my 3, I'll help you with your 1. That makes us even. And so my new routine began. 3 days a week, I would get up at 5 inches the morning, nurse Hope, leave her with Susan, and walk for half an hour to Mrs. Albright's house. I would clean her big house from top to bottom, wash her fine clothes by hand with care, cook her elaborate meals, and when I finished at 3 inches the afternoon, I would walk half an hour back, pick up Hope, and start sewing until it got dark. It was exhausting. There were days I would collapse into bed without even having the strength to take off my shoes. But it was working. I had money for rent, for food, for basic necessities. The other days of the week, I embroidered and sold at the market. Little by little, I started to get clients, ladies who wanted pretty blouses for special occasions, who wanted embroidered tablecloths to impress their guests, who wanted unique shawls that no one else had. Patty sews beautifully, they started to say at the market. And with that, the name Patricia, the quiet, invisible girl who believed in fairy tales and was so easily broken, began to fade away. She belonged to the past. In her place was Patty. Patty was the one whose hands were calloused from work, whose back ached at the end of the day, but whose spirit refused to bend. Patty was the mother who fought for her child. Patty was not a victim. She was a creator, a businesswoman, a survivor. It wasn't just a nickname. It was a reclaiming of myself. I was no longer the girl from the scandal. I was Patty, the woman who sews beautifully. A year passed. Hope started to walk. She was a curious child, always getting into everything, always wanting to explore. Michael, Jessica, and Daniel adored her. They were like her older siblings. They played with her, looked after her, taught her things. One day, Michael asked me, "Aunt Patty, is my dad coming back?" Susan and I looked at each other. We knew that question would come eventually. "Yes," I said honestly. "Richard is the biological father of all 4 of you, but he made bad decisions, and now he can't be with you. Will he come someday? I don't know, honey. But what I do know is that you don't need a dad who lies. You need love, care, and truth. And we can give you that." When Hope turned 2, something unexpected happened. My mom came to visit me again. This time, she brought my sister Lucy with her. Lucy had always been the closest to me of all my siblings. "Patricia," my mom said, without any preamble, "your father is still angry, but I can't go on without seeing my daughter and my granddaughter." My eyes filled with tears. "Mom, don't say anything. Just let me get to know this little girl properly." She crouched down to be at Hope's level. "Hello, beautiful. I'm your grandma." Hope, who was shy with strangers, smiled at her. Something about my mom inspired her trust. Lucy hugged me tightly. "I missed you so much, sister. All these years without talking. Does Dad know you came?" "No," my mom admitted. "And it's better if he doesn't find out. But I can't take it anymore. You're my daughter. You made a mistake. Well, it wasn't even a mistake. You were deceived. But you're still my daughter." That day, they stayed all afternoon. My mom played with Hope, told her stories, sang her songs. Lucy caught me up on everything that had happened in the family. Robert had gotten married. Consuelo was pregnant. Martin was already 15. Before they left, my mom gave me more money. "It's from my secret savings. Your father doesn't know I have it. Use it for something you need." "Mom, I can't accept this." "Of course you can. And I'm going to come every month. The first Sunday of every month, I'll be here. Your father thinks I go to early mass. After church, I'll come here." And she kept her word. The first Sunday of every month, my mom would arrive with Lucy, sometimes with Consuelo. They would also bring me food, clothes they no longer used but that I could make use of, toys for Hope. Little by little, we were rebuilding our relationship. My father never relented. Until the day he died, years later, he never forgave me. But my mom did, and that meant everything to me. The years passed. When Hope was 3, Richard got out of prison. Susan and I knew that day would come, but it still scared us. We heard through the grapevine that he left town shortly after his release, never once trying to contact us or send the court-ordered child support. "It's better this way," Susan said when we realized he was truly gone. "We don't need his money. We've managed on our own all this time. We can keep doing it." And so it was. The years passed, the children grew up. Michael became a responsible young man who helped his mother with everything. Jessica was smart, did well in school. Daniel was the class clown, always making everyone laugh. And Hope, my Hope, was strong, determined. She asked a lot of questions, questioned everything, didn't accept being told that something was a man's thing or a woman's thing. When she was 10, she asked me, "Mom, why does my dad never come to see me?" I sat down with her and told her the truth, the whole truth. How Richard had deceived 2 families, how he had gone to prison, how he had then disappeared. "And does that make me different?" she asked with wide eyes. "From the other kids, for having a dad like that?" "No," I said firmly. "You are not responsible for what your father did. You are only responsible for who you choose to be. And I see a strong, intelligent, kind girl. I see someone who will be great in life. Do you think I can be a teacher, like you wanted to be? I think you can be whatever you want. A teacher, a doctor, an engineer, whatever you dream of. I couldn't study, but you can. And I will work as hard as it takes for you to go as far as you want." I kept that promise. I worked double, triple shifts. I sewed until my fingers bled. I cleaned houses until my back ached horribly. But Hope stayed in school. Elementary, middle school, high school. She was always at the top of her class. Susan did the same with her children. All 3 of them studied. Michael wanted to be a mechanic. Jessica dreamed of being a nurse. Daniel wanted to be a teacher. Our children were going to have the opportunities that we didn't have. One day, when Hope was 17 and about to finish high school, she came running home. Mom, I got in. I got the scholarship." "What scholarship?" "For the university. To study education." "I'm going to be a teacher, Mom, just like you wanted to be." We hugged each other, both of us crying. All the sacrifice, all the work, all the pain had been worth it for this moment. My daughter was going to college. My daughter was going to be a teacher. My daughter was going to break the cycle of poverty and lack of education. This is the moment it all led to. The long nights sewing, the shame, the struggle, it was all for this. The dream that was stolen from a young girl named Patricia was just fulfilled by a young woman named Hope. It's a powerful reminder that from the deepest pain, the most beautiful victories can grow. The day Hope left for the University of Illinois, I went with her to get settled in her dorm room. It was tiny, with just a bed and a desk, but to us, it was a palace. "Mom, how did you do it?" she asked me. "How did you manage to raise me all by yourself?" "I wasn't alone," I told her. "I had your Aunt Susan, your grandmother, your uncles and cousins, and most of all, I had you. You were my reason for getting up every day. When I'm a teacher, I'm going to work. I'm going to help you. You won't have to work so hard anymore." "I'll work until my body gives out," I said. "But it won't be a sacrifice anymore. It will be pride. Pride in seeing what you've achieved, what I've achieved, what we've achieved together." As I rode the bus back to Geneva that day, I looked out the window, thinking about everything that had happened. 22 years since that terrible night when I discovered the truth about Richard. 22 years of hard work, of tears, of moments when I thought I wouldn't make it. But I had made it. I had survived. More than survived, I had thrived. I had my own little workshop now where I made and sold my quilts. I had loyal customers who appreciated my work. I had a daughter in college, fulfilling the dreams I could never fulfill. Susan had also prospered. She had opened a small diner where she sold traditional American food. She was doing well. Her 3 children were studying or working, all on the right path. We had both made it. Without Richard. Without any man. Alone, but not really alone because we had each other. And our children, the 4 that Richard had abandoned, were fine. Better than fine. They were good kids, with values, with an education, with a future. The damage that Richard had caused had not been passed down to the next generation. We had broken that cycle. That night at home, I took out an old photograph. It was from my wedding day with Richard. I looked so young, so innocent, so happy. I knew nothing of what was to come. For the first time in years, I could look at that photo without pain, without rage, without bitterness. The girl in the photo no longer existed. She had died the night she discovered the truth, and in her place, another person had been born. A strong, capable, resilient woman, a survivor. I put the photo away. I didn't need to look back anymore. The future was what mattered now, and the future looked bright. And here I am now, my dears, 71 years old, sitting in my little workshop, surrounded by colorful threads and fabrics waiting to be sewn. So many years have passed since that terrible night when my world fell apart. And yet, when I look at my life now, I see that something beautiful was born from those ashes. Hope graduated from college 5 years ago. She's an elementary school teacher now, just like I dreamed of being when I was a child. She teaches at a school in downtown Geneva. Her students adore her. She teaches them not only math and English, but also to believe in themselves, to not let anyone tell them they can't achieve something. She got married 3 years ago to a good man, a teacher as well. His name is Robert. I investigated him thoroughly before giving my blessing. Believe me, I was not going to let my daughter go through what I went through. But Robert is honest, hardworking, treats her with respect and love, and above all, he sees her as his equal, not as his property. They gave me 2 grandchildren, Danielle, who is 2, and Leo, who is 6 months old. When I hold them, when I see their innocent little faces, I think about everything that had to happen for them to exist. If I hadn't survived those difficult years, they wouldn't be here. That thought fills me with a deep sense of peace. Susan's children also did well. Michael has his own auto repair shop. He's successful. He has several employees. Jessica is a nurse at the General Hospital. Daniel, the youngest, is a middle school teacher. The 4 children that Richard abandoned became productive, good, honest adults. Susan and I are still close. Her diner grew. Now she has a medium-sized restaurant downtown that is always full. She serves the best traditional American food in the city. We are godmothers to each other's children, sisters of the soul, friends. People don't even remember the scandal anymore. They just see us as 2 strong women who raised their children well. Sometimes I wonder, what would have happened if I had made different decisions? If I had gone back to my parents' house when I found out the truth? If I had stayed quiet and continued to be the secret second wife? If I hadn't found the strength to go on? But there's no use in thinking about those what-ifs. The life I lived was the one I lived, and although there was a lot of pain, there was also a lot of learning, a lot of growth, a lot of discovered strength. What fills me with the most pride is not my successful workshop, not the quilts that are now sold in other countries. It's not the money I was able to save with my work. It's that I broke the cycle. I grew up watching my mother be submissive, quiet, obedient, never contradicting my father, never having her own voice. I grew up believing that's how women were supposed to be. Small, invisible, existing through the men in their lives. But when I was forced to survive on my own, I discovered that women can be so much more than that. We can work, we can support ourselves, we can make decisions, we can be whole without needing a man to define us. And that's what I taught Hope. I taught her to study, to be independent, to never depend on a man for survival. I taught her that true love doesn't lie, doesn't control, doesn't manipulate. I taught her to recognize the warning signs that I didn't know how to recognize. When she started dating, she would tell me everything. Once, with a young man she was seeing, she asked, "Mom, is it normal for him to want to know where I am all the time? Mom, is it normal for him to get angry if I go out with my friends?" And I would tell her, "No, honey, that's not love. That's control. Love trusts. Love gives freedom." Eventually, she found Robert, who does treat her as he should, and now she is raising my grandchildren with those same values. Danielle and Leo will grow up in a home where women are respected, where girls can dream as big as boys, where no one will tell them that something is only for men or not proper for young ladies. Susan did the same with her children. She raised Michael, despite being a man, with respect for women. He helps around the house, cooks, cleans, takes care of his own children. He doesn't believe that's woman's work. It's the work of a responsible person, that's all. Jessica and Daniel are also breaking molds. Jessica is the main breadwinner in her marriage, and her husband has no problem with that. Daniel married a woman who is a doctor, and he is proud of her, not threatened. That is the real triumph. Not just that we survived, but that the next generation learned from our experiences. They won't make the same mistakes. They won't accept the same lies. I've thought a lot about Richard over the years. Not with anger anymore. That went away a long time ago. But with curiosity. Did he ever regret it? Did he understand the damage he caused? Did he ever think about the 4 children he abandoned? About 10 years ago, I heard from someone who had seen him that Richard was living in Florida, just working odd jobs. He looked old, tired, defeated. He hadn't started another family, hadn't managed to rebuild his life. And I, who had been the naive girl he deceived, was thriving. I had a family, a business, respect in my community. I had real love from my children and grandchildren. I had peace. Sometimes I think that was the best revenge. Not to actively harm him, but simply to live well. To show that I didn't need him to be happy, that his presence or absence did not determine my worth. Susan and I talked about this once. "Do you think he did us a favor?" she asked me. I know it sounds crazy, but if he hadn't betrayed us, maybe we would have remained submissive women, waiting for a man to define us. We never would have discovered our own strength. She had a point. The pain transformed us. It forced us to grow in ways we might never have grown if everything had been easy. It's not that I'm grateful for what he did. I will never be grateful for the deceit, the lies, the pain. But I can recognize that surviving it made me who I am today. And I like who I am today. I'm going to tell you something I've learned over the years. Pain doesn't destroy us. What we do with that pain is what defines us. We can let it consume us, become bitter, close our hearts. Or we can use that pain as fuel, as a reason to be stronger, wiser, more compassionate. I chose the latter, and every day that passes, I am glad for that decision. Now I work with young women in my community. I teach them to sew, yes, but I also teach them other things. I teach them that they can have their own businesses, that they can support themselves, that they don't have to get married if they don't want to, that if they do get married, it should be with someone who respects them, not controls them. There's a young girl, Maria, who reminds me so much of how I was. She's 19, naive, a dreamer. She's dating a boy who says he loves her, but constantly criticizes her. That dress doesn't look good on you. Why do you have so many friends? A decent woman doesn't go out so much. If you really loved me, you'd quit your job. I sit her down and tell her my story. Not all the details, but enough for her to understand. Maria, true love doesn't make you feel small. It makes you feel bigger. If a man criticizes you, controls you, isolates you, it's not love, it's control. And control can escalate. It can get worse. I don't know if she listens. When you're young and in love, it's hard to see clearly. I wouldn't have listened either if someone had warned me about Richard. But I plant the seed, and I hope that when she needs it, that seed will have grown enough to give her strength. My grandchildren are my greatest joy now. Danielle talks a lot already. The other day she asked me, "Grandma, why do you work so much if you're already old?" I laughed. Because work isn't a punishment, my love. It's a source of pride. I make beautiful things with my hands, and that makes me happy. When I grow up, can I make beautiful things too? You can do whatever you want, my sweet. You can be a doctor, a teacher, an engineer, or a quilter like your grandma. You can be whatever your heart desires, and no one ever has the right to tell you that you can't. That's what I want to leave for my grandchildren. Not money, not property, but that certainty, that strength, that knowledge that they are complete in themselves, that they can overcome anything, that after the darkest night, the dawn always, always comes.